I mean, listen, we talking about practice, not a game, not a game, not a game. We talking about practice, not a game, not the game that I go out there and die for and play every game like it's my last. Not the game. We talking about practice, man. I mean, how silly is that, man? We're talking about practice.
Hey, welcome back to Jeff Needs Sports, everybody. I think everyone has a clue now to what today's subject is. This is my new project called Icons, part of the Off the Ball Network exclusives, and the first one we're going to do is Allen Iverson. So essentially, this show is just going to be digging into some of the most important, controversial, groundbreaking historical figures, games, movies, teams, and the history of sports. And first up is Allen Iverson, and of course, for the premiere show, I had to get my main man, the guy that has. It's been about a year that we've been working together now, actually.
Yeah.
And he's been there for me every time. Couch Coach Live, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. How you doing, Paul Father?
I'm feeling good. I've been working on this project for a while. I'm thinking about it a lot, and I'm really excited for it. And I'm excited that you agreed to be my first guest, and we can do this together, man. And we're gonna launch this together.
Yes, indeed. Definitely honor and a privilege for that. Definitely appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, it's gonna be cool, man. So so that's it. We're talking about Allen Iverson. We're talking about the answer. Just an all-around amazing figure in the history of sports, not just basketball fans, worldwide. And it's going to be a fun show. So let's just kick it off, man. Nickname, The Answer. He's born June 7th, 1975. So he's a fellow 75er. He's listed as 6 foot, 165. I told Coach, I'm like, that's if he had a backpack full of monkey wrenches and platform shoes. But truly one of the undersized Hall of Fame players ever. I went to Georgetown University for a couple years. Drafted first in 1996 by the Philadelphia 76ers. 96, 97 Rookie of the Year. The 2000, 2001 NBA MVP, 11-time All-Star, 4-time scoring champ, 3-time steals leader, 24,368 career points. That's 30th all-time. 26.7 per game average. That's 7th all-time. Averaged 6 assists and 3.7 rebounds for his career. Played 914 games. He started 901 of those. At that size, man, it's amazing. He played 37,584 minutes in his career. That's 58th all time. Average, and this is it. This is the one that stood out, man. This is what separates him from every other human. He averaged 41.1 minutes a game for his entire career. That means he played 90% of every game that he ever was able to. It's just amazing, man. The stats are amazing, but like visually is what blows your mind. But what stood out about the stats, man?
He lived by what he said. He played every game like it was his last. When you look at that stat, that's indicative of what you just said. The 41. You think about it, it's a 48-minute game. He only sits less than 7 minutes. It's 6.6 minutes. He's on the bench of a 48-minute basketball game.
And he notoriously wanted to fight his coach. Most of them were, well, not most of them, but a lot of them were Larry Brown, famously. They were a match made in heaven, but he notoriously wanted to fight his coach every time he got pulled out of the game. Larry Brown said one time, he said, he said, I hated pulling Iverson out of the game. And you're like, why? And he's like, it was the same every time. He said, every time I ever pulled him out of the game, he gave me the F you and and F this and cussed him out every time. It was just a fiery player. We'll kind of get into that, but so we'll just kind of go down through the timeline here. Iverson, his historic athlete. So he Hampton, Virginia. I don't know where. Do you know, or Newport News, right?
Yeah, basically.
Newport News, right? Newport News. Now you're a Virginia guy.
Yeah.
Basically, we all know what we know about Newport News as fans, as we know Allen Iverson came from there. We know Michael Vick famously came from there. We know it portrayed to us not an easy place to grow up. Like, what do you know about Newport News? Maybe you could.
Yeah, I mean, basically, if I, basically to sum it up, the nickname for Newport News is Bad News. So essentially,
Okay.
so it is somewhat of it is a rough area. Definitely true, and indicative of what he's been through. And then a lot of it, a lot of struggle of other athletes as well. That area really ties to it, and when they say bad news, it's really bad news.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm curious, man. Like, just in your opinion, you know way more about the area and where all this took place than I do. What would you? How impressed are you that somebody comes out of that area to be an historic professional athlete like Iverson or Vic or something like that?
It's amazing, and it's funny because that was the era where a lot of those guys, from what we deem it as the 757 area, where you talked about him, and also another guy, one of my childhood idols, Ronald Courage from Plaxico Burress. It's a lot of guys, D'Angelo Hall. It's a lot of those guys, and it's amazing to me that in that cluster, that area code alone, you had those type of athletes, and it was literally like a hotbed for a good almost 20 years, where you have guys that came out of the area, and even before them, Lawrence Taylor's from the area. So you look at I mean, it's amazing to think when you look at it from the totality of it, that all those guys made it out in that same somewhat of a geographical area in the 757 area is amazing. But for Allen Iverson, it's incredible. Like,
yeah, that's fascinating. Of course, we know, or maybe everybody doesn't know, he was one of the best football players in the country in high school. 2 state championships, right? Or at least one. I know it was 1 state, but
yeah, because in 1 year he won basketball and football.
That's right.
Because and what's crazy at football, he was a quarterback. Sometimes he played running back. He was a kick returner, and he was a cornerback. Matter of fact, oh man, I like. It's crazy because I'm telling you, this man was legit. Like he could have if he wanted to play football the next level, he probably could have. He would have got the opportunity.
He's as big as Kyler Murray, who's a #1 pick in the NFL. Like
right.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like you go back and watch these football highlights. It's staggering.
Yes.
Athletic. And when we talk about a pure athlete, we're talking about a pure athlete. We'll get into his practice habits, maybe later on. But he is a natural, pure athlete that he's just a lot of his teammates. They said basically he didn't sleep and he loved Taco Bell. I mean that was his training regimen, man. Really crazy stuff. That's funny you mentioned all those guys coming out of that area. And they all got that. They all have kind of an edge to them. Like every guy you mentioned, like, man, these guys are. They gotta. I don't want to. I can't make that reference. I almost said something about anyway. They got a tenacity to them, and a chip on their shoulder. And Iverson played with a chip the size of, was twice the size of him on his shoulder. Really amazing stuff. So he comes. So he's one of the best athletes in the country, one of the best. Highly regarded athletes in the country. And then he has the what I labeled as the Hampton, Virginia bowling alley incident, which really, it completely derailed his path and changed his story. It changed, the history of Allen Iverson. So essentially what happened, you can help me out here. If people don't know, they can look it up, watch the documentary. It's 30 for 30.
Yeah.
Go ahead, man. No, you go ahead. You take.
Yeah. So basically, he and a couple friends, they were at a bowling alley, from a opposing, I think I forgot it, Powakasin. I know I'm missing the name, but they're a couple other high school, another high school, a rival high school. They kind of all came together in this bowling alley, and then then there was just a big brawl that ensued, and essentially what ended up happening was they pit him into this crime, pretty much saying that he threw a chair at a woman. And actually they charged him, which was weird. It was like a maiming by force or something like that. It's almost kind of, almost like not like a hate crime type of situation, but something that's like kind of far and extreme.
Yeah, like aggravated assault.
Yeah, aggravated assault. Yeah, some of that nature. And now imagine he was 17 at the time and they charged him as an adult.
Yeah.
and and then he was at that time they were looking at he was facing up to 60 years in prison. But I think he ended up getting 15, and then I think 5 ended up being I think he had 10. He had 15 years. I think I forgot how many years was suspended. But lo and behold, luckily the governor at the time, Doug Wilder, essentially pardoned him. I think in 1995. Hence, so yeah.
Yeah, what he spent about 5 months in prison, correct?
5 months, yeah. I think
and this is months. This is his, senior years when he's completely derailed. And it's widely accepted now that it was a complete railroading. Essentially, I know there's a lot of race backstory to it. If you watch the documentaries and stuff. It's agreed, and I know that a big part of it was they come up with a video, which was a little more rare in '93, that showed that he was gone before some of the stuff happened that they said he was a part of. But a lot of people just believe that it was a way to basically take down this athlete, this person, like he was targeted. There's a lot of people in that fight, and so 5 months in prison. So then now, and so I can touch on it from my viewpoint, on a different part of the country. Here's what we're told. Man, this kid's a thug. This kid's a problem. This is just another athlete, wasted talent. Like that was shoved down our throat, because he's my age. I remember, you kind of know that, my basketball friends, like these guys, like the Kobe's and the LeBrons and these high profile high school athletes. And it was just like, wait, what could have been, and all this. So he gets pardoned. And even then that followed him around for the rest of his life. Like, a lot of people didn't want to investigate the situation or look further into it or even forgive. He was a rascal. Nobody will argue that. I mean, he wasn't, I'm not saying that he committed a ton of crimes, but he put himself in a lot of situations like this. You know what I mean? He had his friends and they like to, venture out. He that's just the type of guy he was, and that stigma really followed him. So he goes to Georgetown. Luckily, now, do you know, was he always going to go to Georgetown? This part of the story I really don't know.
For the most part, because I remember, because I probably would go on the assumption that a lot of his opportunities dried up after that situation.
Yeah, he's not going to a Duke or a Carolina. He's not. I mean, he's just not.
Yeah, he's not. Yeah, he's not going to go there. And it was even kind of a risky move by the late John Thompson, to make that to actually recruit him. And then yeah, I think that was probably one of the. I wouldn't say. I know he probably had other options, but definitely for what it was at that time was perceived as almost like you're taking a huge risk, especially considering the fact what has happened. And at that time we didn't, quote unquote, know all the details that entail with that incident. Yeah.
Exactly. That's a great point. That people weren't. They were. Here's what we knew, or fans or viewers or whatever knew. Like, okay, this guy went to jail. Now he's not in jail. All we know is like, he went to jail. That's it. He's a whatever. And John Thompson. For anybody, I know Georgetown's a little different now. It was a big deal. They made the tournament. At this point, they're still Georgetown. Like they're still Big East, a classic. Big East. They're a powerhouse. Like it wasn't like he taken a step back. I mean, this is a high profile school with one of the most historic coaches in the history of college basketball. And I'm always glad that Thompson is the one that took him in, because I think Iverson, and it's funny, I listened to a lot of interviews doing this with Iverson. He always was very upfront about, I didn't need a father figure. Like I had a dad, you know what I mean? Like my parents weren't together, but I had a dad. It's always portrayed as like another one of these players without a father. Like, but Thompson was a mentor. He was a guidance. He was somebody that did help him out. But he was always quick to say that like he didn't need a pseudo dad or whatever. But so I'm gonna give Iverson credit for that, because I don't want him hitting me up. But, so he goes there and he plays for Thompson, and he had a pretty good career at Georgetown, right? I think you remember some of those times.
Oh yeah, the low haircut AI with the Jordan 11s. Oh yeah, the leather 11s. Oh yes, yeah. And he was a problem. Yeah, and them battles with Ray Allen at UConn. Oh, those things.
That's the most famous
Kerry Kittles and Villanova. Like, I mean, they used to battle. And we talk about the Big East, even though it ain't the 80s, but this mid 90s Big East that we talk about was still a great time.
Syracuse always had a good squad. I mean, putting out, you had late 80s Coleman. You had Wallace come out of there in the 90s. Yeah.
Moulton was there when, yeah.
Those were great times. We could do a whole show on Big East basketball. We might do that sometime. Like, for people that don't remember, like, what it was, it's a shame that it's gone. Yeah,
I know, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly, man. So, I think that he played 2 years. His sophomore year, I believe they might have went to the grade 8, maybe, or the Elite 8 in the tournament. I don't think they made the Final Four, but he was a heck of a college player, had a great college career, exciting, just everything. It always struck me about him is when he played, like, he was so, I don't know how to say it, he was kind of small. Like the basketball always looked like it was 3 times the size of everybody else. It was just something unique about, watching him play against these other towers in there. We're talking Georgetown, back in the day when I remember they had, Dikembe and Mourning on the same team, Patrick Ewing, and now Iverson's the best player on the floor, and he's the smallest player on the floor, man. Like, it was crazy. So, yeah, great college career. Really, I don't believe he had any problems, right? I don't remember.
No, I think he at Georgetown, I think he was pretty much
went pretty smooth.
Bald and
And Thompson was is a firm guy. Was a firm guy. R.I.P. But and I think that helped. You know what I mean? I'm sure Iverson knew, like, where that line was and where not to cross. And so one story, you hear it anytime they talk about Iverson and Georgetown and Thompson, but there's a really great story. And I think this was important to Iverson's, like, career and trust, you know what I mean? Because at this point, as a young man, he's got every reason not to trust anybody after what happened in Hampton and all that. But there's a story where I don't remember the school or where they went. Anyway, they go to an away game, and, kids in the crowd, they like to harass the other players. That's college basketball, I get it. But this time they dressed up as inmates. They wore the orange jumpsuits, had handcuffs, the whole thing, dressed up as inmates. And they had a sign that said, Iverson is the next MJ. And they crossed that out like a circle and a slash. And then they wrote in OJ. And Thompson went right to the officials. And, of course, Iverson, like, he wasn't, like, that didn't bother him, so to speak. You know how he was. Like, he wasn't going to back down. But Thompson went right to the officials and was like, they leave or we leave. That's it. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And they made those students, change their clothes and get back. I always thought that was really important to Thompson, like, at that point in time, because that was the fact that people would even think that that's acceptable to do is one thing. But the fact that he was willing to, walk out of a game, for a player, I always think that's an important story, like, just to how he interacted with Allen, man. But so in 1996, Allen Iverson goes first pick in the NBA draft. Now, this is crazy. This is 96 draft, probably the second most important draft or best draft in history. There's just a few of the guys that went after Allen Iverson. A guy named Kobe Bryant, a guy named Steve Nash, a guy named Ray Allen. I believe Marcus Camby was second in that draft. I mean, just truly one of the greatest NBA drafts in history. But Iverson goes number 1 to Philadelphia 76ers, which is crazy, man. That's wild that much talent came out of one draft, right?
Yeah.
It's just amazing. So one of my first questions I had for you, so he gets drafted by Philly, first pick. We just talked about that. What if he doesn't go to Philly? Like, I think to me, Iverson's a guy that needed to go to a certain place, but if he doesn't go to Philly, where do you think he winds up in that draft?
And you know what's so funny? Like, when we talked about it, and I just thought about so many different type of possibilities, and I'm almost kind of thought about it more so in a modern NBA type of format. Like, just imagine if you would have went to Toronto and had Damon Stoudemire and Allen Iverson. I thought about that, and that was the first thing that it triggered in my mind. Like, because and another thing to think about at that time, he was the first guard to be selected first overall since 1979 since Magic Johnson.
Oh, wow!
And to your point, where you look at Georgetown, the hierarchy, it was big men, and now a generous 6 foot 165-pound player is the best player on their team, which never happens in that modern day era.
Yeah.
But I thought about that. I thought about what if, in this modern age, because, now you can play two small guards like that now.
Oh, yeah.
And then you think about what if, Vancouver, if, instead of getting Sharif Abdul-Rahim, him and having maybe a guy like a Big Country Reeves, kind of the supplement with that, and then also kind of piggyback to the Toronto angle, because remember Isaiah Thomas was running the show in Toronto at that time. So I wonder how that relationship could have been, like as far as how he would have been taking them under a wing. So
let's talk about that, because I like this, I want to think about that. I knew this 96 draft would get a side. So here's how it went. 1, Philly, Iverson. 2, Toronto. Now this must have been Toronto and Vancouver. Was this their expansion year? Or maybe the second.
This a second year, because I think Damon Stoudemire was their first ever pick, and then Big Country was theirs in '95.
Stoudemire, Mighty Mouse, one of my favorite players ever. Love that guy. I'm glad you brought him up.
Yeah.
And he, you know what? He probably paved the way for Iverson to get that shot that you're talking about, because they're like, man, look what happened with Stoudemire. Because if you don't know, go back, and Stoudemire was ferocious. We're really, really good player. 2 was Toronto, Marcus Camby. Marcus Camby had an all right career. He's another guy that probably would be better to be drafted now. A smaller, more active forward. Sharif Abdul-Rahim, really good player for Vancouver. Mm-hmm. So here's an interesting one. This is a little interesting in this draft. Number 4 is Stephen Marbury. So I would say that Marbury and Iverson were linked pretty tight. Their whole probably growing up. They're, and all that stuff, because they were similar type of players as far as perception. Marbury goes 4 to Milwaukee. And I remember Marbury coming out of Georgia Tech. He was a can't miss also. That's an interesting one there too.
And what's so funny, Jeff? And that's another one. If you would have went to Milwaukee, because you think about it, they had Glenn Robinson, Ben Baker, and you think about it, because because you think about it, I wonder if he would have been, because he would have. It's almost like he could have been almost like what Ray Allen was, but in a smaller frame.
Yeah.
When you look at it, because we thought that was really dynamic even at the time to have Ray Allen.
Oh, it was a huge
as your 2, and then because I think Sherman Douglas was their point guard. I think, if my memory serves correct.
Oh, probably still. Yeah.
And I think and then you look at when you have because you had Glenn Big Dog.
Yeah.
And then you had Ben Baker, and those two guys Ben Baker ended up becoming an all-star. Ben
Baker was a hell of a player.
Yeah, so in this match, you would have had a guy like he would have had kind of finishers.
Yes.
That definitely would have helped his career. And I think at that time, because I don't even remember who their coach was, but Sam Cassell.
Yeah, Sam Cassell.
But that's what I'm saying. It's so crazy. Milwaukee, now I think out of all of them would be intriguing. I think Milwaukee would have been the best place for him to go, or if they would have kind of did the trade and him go to Minnesota with KG.
Oh man!
If they would have did that, and he goes to Minnesota, which my goodness, that changed the fortunes for him and Kevin Garnett.
Changes NBA history. So. Yeah. So I'll read a few more off here, the 96 draft, just so people can go research it, because this is amazing. Nice. So 5, Minnesota takes Ray Allen. They trade for Stephen Marbury. So Marbury winds up in Minnesota. Ray Allen goes to Milwaukee. Really an underrated career in Milwaukee. Ray Allen was good.
Yeah.
Milwaukee's even now with Giannis, you just don't, they're just not poster board material, especially in a time of, we're still talking about, they're playing in a time of Jordan. That's what's looming in the room here.
And you know what? And Ray Allen used to be almost like a slasher type. He was almost he was like a poor man's Dwayne Wade. People fail to realize that, because he was in the slam dunk contest. Yep. His rookie year, Ray had ups. People you think about that shot in 2013, you think it's a prolific 3-point shooter, but in the beginning, Ray Allen was a dog. He would dunk on you disrespectfully.
Yes, I think Wade's great. It'd be and he made that choice to, a lot of people. He wasn't just a 3-point shooter, but he was so good at it that I think he saw the writing on the wall. He saw the writing on the wall and was like, I can make one more point from back here and play for 30 years, right? Antoine Walker goes to Boston. Lorenzo Wright, Kerry Kittle's another fun player out of Villanova. I liked him better in college, but he was a good good NBA player. Samaki Walker, he's not too far from here. And let's see here. Then you got number 13. The Hornets take Kobe Bryant and trade him to LA. Like, you want to talk about a what could have been that would change the complete landscape of the NBA as we know it. If you start at that point when and Kobe stays in Charlotte, nothing that we know in the NBA is happening right now. It is completely different league. Shaq probably goes ring chasing, and then Charlotte probably gets a ring. Then you got Kobe versus Michael maybe at some point, if it goes right. Like, anything could have happened.
Here are two scenarios. We probably wouldn't have had the Pelicans.
Nope.
Because if you'd have had a guy like Jordan, wouldn't have been the owner of this new Hornets team.
Nope, none of that.
I'm telling you,
there wouldn't be a new Hornets team.
Right,
it'd still be
they would still be in Charlotte.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Right.
Steve Nash goes 15th to Phoenix. Boy, that was a great get there. So, just a great draft. I recommend anybody go look at it. So here's a few other what ifs. If Philadelphia could do it over again, do you think they still take Iverson, or obviously they take Kobe? Everybody take Kobe. We know that. Which how they didn't, him growing up in it, like that's still baffles me. Because it wasn't like he didn't show the talent. Maybe if he has a year of college, without a doubt he goes. But, it is what it is. So what do you think let's talk about Iverson and Steve Nash. Steve Nash became like one of the best all-around point guards of the history that we've ever seen. And Iverson really, he wasn't a point guard. I mean, we know that. Like, Iverson, do you think Iverson could have learned to play a different type of game? Or do you think that it was like what he was going to do was be the one man, wrecking crew that he was no matter what?
Which is funny. I think he could have. I think he just had finishers. He didn't have finishers.
Yeah.
Another thing I thought about too when we would talk, planning this, like, what if they would have kept Jerry Stackhouse and he would have evolved?
That would have been nice.
That would have been something that, and I think they kind of pulled the trigger on him a little bit prematurely, I think, in my personal opinion.
Yeah.
And I think they could have been a nice duo as a backcourt.
And I think if Iverson would have had somebody like, at first, when I first started doing this, I'm like, no, Iverson, this is what Iverson was going to do, because that's how he is. He's like, I trust myself. I can do this. And it did fail him to certain ways. Like, his teammates, I mean, if you watch those, I remember you watch those old, 76ers games, then his teammates basically stood around, and then they were asked to bust their ass on the other end of the court. And then when they basically got to play half a game, and if they did get Iverson was a great passer of the ball. Like, he really was, but you didn't know when or where it was going to happen. You know what I mean? It wasn't consistent. His guys didn't know if he was going to make that same pass every time. And so there was never that trust there. They never built the actual offense, that would have took him to the moon. Cause I think if in a different world, different timeline, he somehow becomes a Steve Nash type, like in a system like that, I think then he's probably the best we've ever seen, because the way he could penetrate, how quick he was on these, with these passes, how accurate his passes were. If he chose to go that route, obviously his points go down, but I still think he's maybe the best, one of the top point guards that we've ever seen. If that's how it works out, like you say, if he has those guys, if he goes to Milwaukee, who knows about a different coach? Larry Brown, we don't know how good a coach Larry Brown is. I mean, we really don't. Like, he had a lot of faults until he finally, broke through. Was he the best coach for Iverson? I don't think so. But it is what it is. But I think there's a world to where Iverson is the best passer in the NBA. Averages 12 assists, 25 points a game for 5 years. I really think that could have been.
Yeah. And just imagine if you would have had, like, now, in this present day where you got like guys on the wing that can shoot, and how he's able to can penetrate through and kind of go through passing lanes and dish it out there. I mean, it's
unstoppable.
He'd be unstoppable.
Oh yeah,
he could draw defenders in and have guys open.
Yeah, and he would be a better shooter. Like, we talk about this with every guy. If they played in this era, like, they all would have been better shooters, because they would have shot have just done it more. No, he could still play now. Like you say, it would be even better with the space they have now, less contact they have now. You don't just have guys shoving him down, into the into the hoop and things like that. And then if you put some spot up shooters in the wing, in the corners, like he's going to get it to him every time. Well, I mean, like I said, it'd be what we saw with kind of the Steve Nash Suns. What if Iverson goes to a D'Antonio offense? It might be the greatest, still to this day, the greatest thing we've ever seen.
Because he's
a better player than Steve Nash. Steve Nash just played a different system, and because even Steve Nash would admit he should have shot it more in that system. He admits it to this day. Like looking back, he sees what these guys are doing now, and he's like, I should have just shot it more. He'd be Steph Curry maybe, or that was the way. And Iverson went the other way. Iverson just played it. He played like the 3-point line wasn't there. He wasn't a great 3-point shooter. Didn't really care because he was just such a dynamic scorer. It was amazing. So he comes in 96. Now, really the most important thing is when Iverson comes into the league, it's a new age. I was watching his highlights the other day. He was one of the only guys on the court. Now, this is amazing in the NBA. He was one of the only guys on the court with visible tattoos. And I remember that was such a big deal. He was so polarizing. I mean, it felt more than half the country wanted this kid to fall flat on his face. Then he still had the short hair. He wasn't quite into cornrows but then when that started happening, oh my gosh. Like I remember just like we always say, everybody clutching their pearls, like, oh, this is it. This is the end of the NBA. All I heard for the early, like late 90s, early 2000s was, a bunch of thugs and this and that, and they weren't doing anything. None of these guys were actually like going to jail or anything. It was like they specifically saw, the tattoos, the whatever jewelry, whatever, and that was it. That's what they judged him on. And if Iverson famously wore the oversized flat billed hats, he'd do an interview, they pull it down to his nose, man. But he knew what he was doing. He knew what he was selling, because let me tell you what, I raised a kid in that generation, and when my son was probably 5 years old, his favorite player in the world was Allen Iverson. And he would pack his armbands like all the way down his arm to get the sleeve. All the kids wanted the Iverson sleeve. And then he would, when he was in the shower and his hair got wet, he would try to make cornrows in his hair when his hair was wet in the shower. So we're talking a 5-year-old white boy in Ohio. And he wanted nothing more in this world to grow up and look exactly like Allen Iverson, like that. And that's not unusual. That was everybody across the country. Young people loved him, man. Right?
Yes.
How did you feel about him? Like at this time, you're a young man at this time. You're a basketball fan.
Yeah, it was. It's funny. It was different. I mean, when you think about it, when we look at guys at that time, clean cut, we call had the Madison Avenue appeal. You look at Jordan with the bald head.
Yep.
Most of the guys that was in the league were like, just. I put it this way, just like I said, no visible tattoos, especially, and I'm glad you brought up that point about the armband, because that was a first.
Oh yeah,
the sleeve. That's iconic, because he's the first one that did that, and it was genius, and even people use it now present day. So that's kind of thing that sticks out. But yeah, he was. But like you said, it's funny, Jeff, how the media portrayed that, though.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like they made it as such a negative thing where a guy had to. Because remember, I don't know if you remember one of the, I think, I don't want to web magazine now because I don't want to, do that. But I forgot which magazine it was. But remember they airbrushed his tattoos?
Yes.
I don't know if you remember that one of the publications at the time.
I don't even think it was a sports one. I think it was some sort of like a entertainment type of magazine. But they did. Yeah. They thought it was too much. Because I asked this question to you in the sheet, and basically, like, all I remember is like, quote unquote, like, was he too black for America at that point? Like, because we all know that there's a racial overtone to this. When they say this is how it was fed to us back here in middle Ohio. When they say he's a thug, we knew exactly what they were getting at.
Yeah, right? and it's another, and this is a perfect example of him being an icon, because like I was mentioning earlier, there was a certain image at that time of NBA players who you looked at. We talked about Michael Jordan, very well groomed, bald head, always came in with a suit, just looked, like a very, debonair human being.
Yeah.
But you got a guy who's the inverse. It's almost like how, right, you're right. When it said at that time it was deemed he was too black because he was like the rebellious ones. He's the one that comes in with the tattoos. At that time, we loved tall tees. Even as a teenager at that time, we wore tall tees. I had cornrows. I think in 2000. In 2001, I had cornrows back then. Yeah. All that, and he wore the throwback jerseys, the baggy jeans, the chains. I didn't have a chain, but everybody wore chains.
Yeah.
So. And then what ended up happening was that's when people say that they say it conveniently. Well, it's the wardrobe change. Not to say coincidence, like he was the reason why, but they say a lot of guys like they attribute to it, like Tim Duncan and other guys who was the main culprit. Yep. But we all know at the end of the day, he planted that seed. And Absolutely. When you think about it, where now you look at the modern day where they didn't accept that, when the cat come in, he ain't playing, he wearing a tall, 4X t-shirt, he 106 pounds.
and he did this going to press conferences. He did this doing interviews. Yep. Totally like the one thing that stands out about Iverson, totally unapologetic. So what was crazy at this time is he comes in, he's playing a brand of basketball that really, it does work, but it really doesn't work. It really still doesn't. Hero ball still isn't great. But like as the old, sports reporters and stuff are killing him for everything that we just talked about and his basketball style. And he's a bad teammate and fights with the coach and doesn't work out enough and all this. At the same time, young America was eating it up. Like that is exactly what we needed. Like, no, this is the guy that looks like me. This is the guy that I want to watch play. Like, I don't care about, the legacy of this. And, coming off the Jordan years to where everything was like team and put a team together and win. And it was all about dynasties and all that, and then Iverson comes in and it's just like each game is a show. It's an entertainment. And he came to do that. And the bigger picture might've got lost in it, but like young people, especially kids, man. Like I remember when my nephews and son, they played like the Gus Macker tournaments, which is like an outdoor 3-on-3 tournament, that went around for a while. Half the kids, everybody wanted to wear number 3. Yeah. Everybody wanted to wear the sleeve. They fought over the number 3. They fought over the sleeve. Like every little guy, like my son he's a small kid. So Iverson was an icon to him. Like he still is like very, very important to, you can identify. I'm the same size as Iverson, so I can't fathom a tip back dunk or an alley-oop dunk or doing the things that he did. Like at the same time as, this older generation of reporters and stuff were pushing back on him so hard. Underneath all that, he was taking the world by storm. They think that in the early 2000s, they consider him, he might've been the most famous athlete in the world across the globe at the same time to where the reporters in his own sport are doing nothing but like killing him for it. It was really amazing time. I always said like watching him play basketball was like watching hip hop like that. It just, you can hear like the soundtrack when you're watching this man play. It's just really fascinating stuff. One of a kind.
And it was just different. It was just a different style because, when you think about at that time, the conventional point guards, for the most part, were kind of boring. When you think about it, not to say that, but, you look at like the John Stocktons and all of them.
Yep.
They weren't kind of like this, headline drawing type of, guys at that time. And Allen Iverson, he just fit the bill.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just really, like you said, it's and that's why sometimes I think that he gets, I think people automatically think, well, he'd be better playing now, like we talked about. But I think it was so important that he played in because we were in what I call the Jordan hangover. And you're a Bulls fan, I'm a Bulls fan. Like I remember that. I remember like the 99 season is one of the worst seasons. Like one of the I just can't. It was just terrible. What a letdown after the 98, Bulls run. And then 99, the stars were weird. The drafts were confusing. The players weren't getting in the right spot. So we had athletic players, but It wasn't a game that supported him then. It was just a weird time. It wasn't great. Early 2000s NBA wasn't great. And then at the same time, Iverson and Kobe's coming up through this. And it's kind of weird how Kobe was sneaky becoming one of the greatest players of all time at the same time, but he didn't care about any of this stuff. Like, he was not like, he sold shoes or whatever, but like, he wasn't on every poster. He wasn't on every commercial. Like, he was becoming the legend that he became. And as to where Iverson was like playing in the now, like, I don't care about, he played every game like he didn't care about, the next game or know if he was going to play the next game, as to where Kobe at this exact same time is crafting his game and setting himself up for that three-peat, in LA. And yet Iverson is widely the most fascinating player in the NBA at the same time. It was a wild time. I think people forget that those two, came up through the years together, because there was never a connection, really. You know what I mean? It's just odd. It wasn't Magic and Bird. That's what I mean. It was like two separate paths, two separate NBAs that they played in. And that's how it wound up. I mean, Kobe wound up with 5 and Iverson wound up with no championships, for sure. So I think the most, the most important season he had was obviously, I'll say the best season was the 2000-2001 season. He runs through the league. He takes this Philadelphia team that it's hard not to crack on him, because you don't know how maybe these players were better than we think. If Iverson's John Stockton, we don't really know. Not a great supporting cast. Carries them all the way to the NBA Finals against what is considered really one of the better teams in the last 30, 40 years, against the Kobe and Shaq. This is the Kobe and Shaq Lakers dynasty that we're talking about. Yeah. So, do you remember like what you thought about that finals matchup? Like, I was obviously like, well, this is going to be, the Lakers hadn't lost, right? Weren't they undefeated?
Yeah, they were undefeated up until game 1. I think, because I think they had 3, which is weird. They had 3 game first round series.
Why they got rid of that? Got rid of that because of the Seattle Sonics getting upset by Denver that year. They're like, oh no, we're not doing best of 5 anymore. That's exactly when it stopped. That was a really good Seattle team that got upset by Dikembe and the Denver Nuggets. There's no more 3 out of 5 after that. But so here we go. This is the biggest game in Iverson's career to this day, which is kind of sad that, 4 or 5 years into his career, the biggest game of his life would be game 1 of the 2001 finals. He beats the Lakers. I'll say he beats the Lakers. This is a great Lakers team, well-rounded Lakers team. You got Shaq. This is Shaq at his height of his powers. And then you got literally the opposite of him, takes it to him in game 1. You got Kobe standing there, the guy that got drafted the same year, that has to watch this. You know what I mean? Like, he's it just really the pinnacle game of like says everything about Iverson. He guts his team to a win, steps over Ty Lue. It's just an absolute iconic moment in NBA history. And full disclosure, Allen felt bad about that, and he's apologized. And him and Ty Lue are good friends, actually. He regrets doing that. He said it just happened. In his interviews, he's like, it just happened. I probably shouldn't have done that, which I always like about Iverson. Like, he's willing to admit faults and flaws and things he did wrong and could have done better. He's a real open book. And that's why current NBA players just love him. But so that finals game, man, he takes game 1. That's it. Lakers they blow him out of the water the next 4 games. But you can never take that game away from Allen Iverson, right? Like, he goes into the locker room and says, "Put the brooms away. Put the brooms away." It's one of my favorite. He's a quote machine. But that was a great. That was a great time. But would you have thought then that was it? That was basically the end of Allen Iverson's. I mean, honestly, his success in the playoffs. That was it, man.
Not at all, because when you think about it, you would have thought more was to come, because at least they would have built off of at least, the whole Dikembe Mutombo coming in, and you figured they were going to kind of make some moves to kind of help him. And you figured the sky's the limit, because you think about it, at this time, Allen Iverson is maybe 25, 26 years old. So you got to think to yourself, like, he's not even entering his prime, and, to a point where there's got to be more.
So who do you I've thought about this a lot, and I don't know if it's just a different NBA or what, but what do you think went wrong there? Why do you think it was Iverson that they couldn't bring in guys that would work with him that fit? They just couldn't find a guy that fit, or do you think it was just they didn't do it like we'll take what he gives us in the regular season? We're not really, because why weren't there more moves made when you got a guy like him, a known entity, like that what he gives you? Why did they never bring in another complimentary player like that? It was a little different then. There wasn't quite as much move in the NBA, but I know Dikembe, they're like, okay, we'll bring in a rim protector, but Dikembe is not an offensive guy. And Allen you've said it a few times, he needed an offensive guy. He needed someone to finish. He needed a wing. And your theory, what broke down there?
And that's weird because even in that trade, they got rid of Theo Ratliff, who was literally the same thing as Dikembe Mutombo. Yeah. And it's almost, and I don't know. And you guys sit down and you think about it, like it's got to be. And I mean, I think it's got to be. You really got to attribute to the management, and then just the whole thing, and them of Larry Brown leaving as well, and then all the other series of events as far as the multiple coaching changes, going forward. It's just, and then they just didn't have the continuity. I mean, when almost like it felt like they rested on their 2001 laurels, and they just well, we got Allen, we good, but we're not.
Yeah, it always amazed me because, and then I'm like, well, I don't know what goes on behind the scenes. Maybe, then Allen's reputation wasn't as good as it is now. Like as he's aged really well. NBA players love him. He's one of the most respected, revered players in the NBA. And he's one of the few guys now. He's not a get off my lawn guy. He really supports these young guys and encourages them and promotes today's game. But then it wasn't quite the same. I'm sure then I remembered no, this guy's, it was just like, he's a ball hog, can't play with anybody. But then now looking back, I don't know if that was true. I don't know if that was true at all. Because later in his career, he was a better teammate. He wasn't the player because you just can't play like he did for 20 years. But when he gets into Denver, even a little time in Detroit, he was a good teammate. And we don't know that he couldn't have been one in Philly. I would like to go back and know what the breakdown was there of why they didn't build a team around him like you would now. Or maybe it was simply they saw the writing on the walls and they're like, well, there's no reason to fight this Lakers team. Why spend money nobody was beating that Lakers team. And if they don't break up, they might win 7 in a row. We don't know. That team was, well, I guess they did lose to the Pistons, but so I don't know. It's just always weird. There's always a kind of a what if, what broke down. And I know Iverson takes the blame for it. And it is true. He didn't have great practice habits. He stayed out late. He ran with his crew all the time. He didn't work out. It's one of the greatest quotes when so well, you know what? Let's talk about it. So not too long after this, we have the news conference. So basically what it was, Iverson, the Sixers get knocked out of the I believe it was I got the date right here, May 7th, 2002. So they just got knocked out of the playoffs. The Celtics beat the Sixers out of the playoffs. So it's Iverson's press conference, and this is the famous, everybody knows it. You heard it at the beginning of the show. This is we talk about practice press conference, and something that's kind of lost in history. This one was important press conferences. It's just fascinating stuff if you haven't seen it. So all we got from Matt was 2 minutes of we talking about practice and the awkward laughs. But man, if you listen to the whole half hour, he gets deep and he gets serious and he really opens up and he's taking on, reporters. He's challenging them, he's calling them out. He's a little rude sometimes, but he sat there and they're probably guaranteed about 15 minutes then. And Iverson's there 15 minutes. You can hear his press, secretary say, okay, we're done now. And Iverson's like, nah, let him talk, and just shut her down, which it was kind of rude. Once again, he's apologized. He was caught in the moment. And then you get 15 more minutes of Iverson just basically saying what more do you want from me? And all this. Now, everything he said in that wasn't true, but still one of the most fascinating 30 minutes in sports history. I recommend anybody go to YouTube, watch this. And listen to what this man has to say, because he touched on some really important things, like as far as like the overall topics and underlying topics and stuff. So that happens. And then now, so anything after that, Iverson's career is just a little different because that happened. Essentially what it was, he didn't go to all the practices, and Larry Brown just said, we'd like to see him at practice more. And when the reporter pushed him on it, it was over, man. Do you remember do you remember like that sound like from that night?
Yeah, it was interesting because, and that's another thing where, because you got to think about it, during that time, we think in 2002, where it's not like it is now, where we were able to kind of access the whole 30 minutes. In that sound bite, it was perceived as almost like he didn't care. And that's the thing that's the beauty of now, where, when these things happen, you have a voice and you can say what you can say. But at that time, they made it seem like essentially, hey, he don't want to work. Yep. He not even saying that he lazy, but that's how it was perceived at that time. It's just like he don't care. It's almost like he come in here with almost of a laissez-faire type of mentality, and that's how it was perceived back then. And that's what's so great about this day and age. And a lot of people, we always say this too. He's very misunderstood, and that's due to the media at that particular time, because when we at that time, how we got our information was very vague. When we think about what we see on the TV, what we read the next day in the paper, we had the internet, but not like how it is now, where it's kind of where you have the social media aspect, or even a first person encounter of that, where he could have been able to kind of have those type of clips or whatever to his own social media, where he's able to, follow that. So, yeah, I mean, at that time, it was definitely like it was major, because a lot of people pinned him as this, just don't care. It's like, why is, and what's funny about it all is this clip that really got me was, remember what they were saying about, you need to come to practice because it makes your teammates better.
Yeah.
And then it's like, how the hell me coming to practice making my teammates better?
Yeah.
Which, and at that time, you got to think about it. In 2002, that was like jaw dropping. Like at that time, it was like, what the hell are you doing at that time? But,
yeah. I always, sorry about that. Yeah. I always thought you touched on most of it, but I agree. Like, it's kind of a travesty that he wasn't given the platform like he would be given now, like a LeBron James or somebody now, to say, because he could have really and he still did it. Like he did cause a stir in sports, and he did get some of these, like, the perceptions, like, especially like, the racial perceptions and stuff. Like, he did bring it to the surface. They tried to squash that. Like you said, the media, that what they fed us was not what was really happening. But he did it enough to where people started like, man, there's something more here. Let's dig into this. And he did bring a lot of that to the surface. And I believe that has helped, because you couldn't hide the real people anymore. This was a time in sports to where it was the most shut up and dribble time that we've ever had, because they had a voice and they still didn't want to hear it. I mean, it was very like that, and Iverson wasn't having it. And his famous Stephen A. Smith interview a few years later, right after he asked him about advice for LeBron and Carmelo and these guys that had just come out in the draft, and he actually went just the opposite. He said, "Be fake, don't just play the game." It's like, basically like it's too hard to try and be yourself. They'll come after you. They'll try to knock you off your pedestal. And he was not wrong. That is exactly. They tried to do that. Even LeBron, even right now, LeBron.
To this day.
I hear it, man. I hear it every day. A guy, here's a story that connects that. A guy tells me the other day, I asked him, I know his kid's a huge sports fan. We talk about it all the time. And so I hadn't seen him in a while. I asked him, I said, man, I said, right now, like, I always like trying to touch base, with our fan, with the fans, and see what they're thinking. And I'm like, I was like, hey, who's your son's favorite player right now? Like, what's his thing, And he's like, because I was asking about the NBA. And he's like, kind of trying to steer him away from the NBA. I was like, man, are you kidding me? And and for the reasons that you think,
Yeah.
and he wasn't rude about it or anything, but I thought, man, how could you take this is one of the best times we've ever seen in NBA history, and how could you censor that from somebody and keep that from them? You know what I mean? And this is the time that Iverson played in that he really took a lot of heat for this kind of stuff in the press conference. And like I say, I remember vividly. I mean, I know how people, like, let's say if you were a huge Larry Bird fan, you probably didn't like Allen Iverson very much. And yet, but Larry Bird played a wide open freestyle game and it was cool. You know what I mean? Like that was fun. When Larry Bird's doing it and all that. So Iverson's but he's still like, there's a part of the country that latched onto him in that he was a hero for. They weren't worried about how many rings he won. They wasn't worried about MVPs. Like that was their guy, that was gonna pull him through this. And I think, which is crazy because they're from the same area, but Michael Vick was going to be like that also. Yep. Obviously he derailed himself.
Yeah.
And, guys like that, like the youth latch onto, and it's not even a black and white thing. Just like I say, my son, as a small player that loves basketball, attached himself to Allen Iverson. Like this is the guy that says we can do it. And I think we missed an opportunity to promote that, like we do with Steph now. You know what I mean? Like Steph is like, this is a new way, and we can talk about that. I don't think there is a Steph Curry without an Iverson first. You know what I mean? I think Steph Curry is the evolution of what Iverson started back then. And now Steph is rewarded for, like, he found a new way to play at a different body type and a different size and a different skill set. And it's worked. Now he's going to go, he's a legend of the game. And he was encouraged to do it because he came along 20 years later, man.
Yeah.
So it just real, oh man, just a real great stuff. So nothing was really the same after that. So I'll just ask this. I had this wrote down. Was he a good or a bad teammate? What do you think?
I think for what you hear from other people, they love him.
It seems like it.
The perception from other, from teammates that are willing to speak on Allen Iverson, they love him. And I think, when you look at it, because everybody's not going to be the perfect teammate, but I think he's going to be, from what is, perceived and what I've read about him and whatever, that he's going to ride for you. And I think that's all you really want. He's not going to be the ultimate nice guy that's going to always, do this and third and kind of, somebody that you're going to like 100% of the time. But at the end of the day, it's just like everything. It's like a brother relationship. It's almost like you're going to have good times and bad times. It's going to be ebb and flows. It's never always going to be, hunky dory every day. But I think they understood that what he stood for, and they knew that, hey, if he gonna ride, we gotta ride. It's almost like there's an expectation. And even to the press conference, he said, a game that he'd die for, and this and third, and all the type of that, and you'd hope that most people perceive that and kind of was like, well, I need to be going hard just like this, and so yeah, I mean, from what I perceived, he may not have always been the best teammate, but I think he's the right teammate for anybody. I mean, I definitely think he would be a type that at least would be, I would call a leader at this point.
You have a chance. He gives you a chance to win every game. That's what I say about a great player. Every game.
I think he's more like a lead by more like lead by play, more so than more. I don't think he's more of a vocal leader per se.
Yeah.
But I think he's probably more of a leader of actions. Like, I see him doing this, I need to up my game. I need to do this and the third.
So that's one of those things. Like, and he's one of those guys too. Like, we don't know what happens if he gets like Kobe. Kobe gets drafted. What do we say, 14th or 15th or whatever? And obviously, Kobe wore that the rest of his career. Like another motivation. Who knows if Iverson gets drafted 30th And so, your contracts are less. Of course, back then rookie contracts were huge, so it might not have been so bad. But does that make him? Is that turn him into a different player? So many little things could have happened because I just think that he was. I think he could have been a lot of different players. I think if he plays his career 20 times, I think you might get 20 different versions of Allen Iverson just because of his skill set. If he goes to a different city, it's going to be different because 76ers, like, they loved him, but Philadelphia's a hard town too. Like, a lot of them were really hard on him, really hated him. Kind of, I won't say it hurt his feelings. He's an emotional guy, right?
Yep.
And so he let that get to him a little bit. Like, he couldn't understand why his perception of what he's doing is laying it all on the line for the Philadelphia, and he couldn't understand why the backlash. But you can't understand how you could watch like, if you're a fan of that team, like, if Jordan would have done this, we wouldn't have been like, oh, this is cool. As long as he's winning scoring titles, we would have been like, no, like, looking back, that's not the version that we wanted. So
Right.
I kind of give Philly fans a break because they're like, no, we understand what we're seeing in you, and we know that it can be better. And it never reached that. It never hit that next level. And and Iverson justifies it by the 41 minutes a game he played. Yeah, you were there. You were there every game, and you gave it all. But there's a better version out there for sure.
Yeah.
Our friend Steven asked, what made him age poorly? And I would assume that he's discussing, like, literally, like, how quick he fell off at the end of his career.
Yeah.
And it was purely the way he took care of himself and the way he lived.
Yeah.
He wouldn't lift. He didn't lift weights. He's like, he said, what did he say one time? They asked him about lifting weights. He's like, that shit's heavy. Like, he didn't want to do anything like that.
Right.
In the same press conference, he says, if I come in here all swole next year, you automatically give me the MVP. He's like, that's crazy talk. Like, but you weren't going to talk him into it. He didn't, that's where Kobe, his body was a temple. Everything was thought out. Everything was and it paid off. That's what I said. It paid off. Iverson was the opposite. It was Taco Bell and late nights and all that. And that's what it was. You can't, you play 41 minutes a game and don't take care of your body. Like, it's shut down. He's shut down. And once he lost a step, that was it. Cause he didn't have another, there's where we talk about his game didn't evolve. He could have had a Ray Allen 5 years like Ray had there at the end, but he never evolved into that player. And that was his choice. I'm not going to hold it against the guy, right or wrong, So, his career was weird. He goes to Denver, doesn't have a bad run there. Then he had that weird, like, went to Detroit. Yeah. He went to Detroit, and then he, like, left. There was some weird stuff in there. And then he tried to go, I think he went to Turkey and played a little bit.
And
it's rough. Go ahead.
What's so funny is so at the time, this was maybe like 2009. So the Wizards had training camp in my home in Richmond, Virginia. So they had an exhibition against the Memphis Grizzlies, and this is when I knew it was over for him in the NBA. So they're playing and what have you, and everybody's like, "Oh, the feature is Allen Iverson." So they're in a huddle, and I don't know what quarter it was. They're in a huddle now. They all kind of huddle together, like you see an NBA bench. Why is Allen Iverson like about 10 chairs away from the bench?
Yeah,
just sitting there, almost like Bernie Sanders style. I was like, "Oh boy, this is it. This is over."
Yeah,
because at that time we already kind of knew it was over, but that let me know like that was literally the nail in the coffin.
Yeah, it was quick, and he fell off, and he's like, "Okay, I'm out." It was so weird, man. How that all went down. It was just crazy. So, yeah. Like Steven brings up, the steals.
Right.
Allen Iverson, one of the top steal guys of all time. I think he led in steals 3 seasons. It's funny to listen to him. Another man, I tell you, just go listen to interviews of Allen Iverson. He's like, he's like, well, why can't I get Defensive Player of the Year? And he was talking about how he taught Larry Hughes everything he knows, and then everybody's talking about what a great defender Larry Hughes is, and Allen's like, I'm the one that taught him all that. Like, they never talk about. He wasn't scared to do that, but it came off so genuine that it didn't.
Right.
That's where LeBron and Jordan, those guys take so much flack for how disingenuous they are. Iverson was quite the opposite. Like, everything he said, you're like, all right, I believe him. Like, And I think that's something we all loved about him. So, all right, so here we go. A couple quick questions. Is the answer the greatest nickname in basketball history?
It's up there.
It's
like
top
the
five,
answer.
I think.
Yeah, the answer. I like that. I love that.
Are we gonna call Magic a nickname? Because if Magic's a nickname, that might be the yes.
Magic. But his real name is Irvin. So yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah, it would be a nickname. Yeah, it would be Magic.
But the answer is it's awesome. I mean, that's another thing. Well, so
yeah.
Because his first shoe was the question. That was
yes.
We should talk about the shoes for a minute. So him and Reebok basically took on Jordan, which was unheard of back then. I mean, Jordan, he was retiring, or when Iverson came in, he wasn't retired. But Jordans were king, and you didn't challenge it. And Reebok comes out and puts the questions and then the answers on Allen Iverson, and they were one of the most popular shoes in the history of time. Were you a shoe guy? Were you an answer guy?
No, I was Jordan. I was Nike Jordan. Even though I do like them now, and it's funny because they starting to come back out again.
Yeah, they're huge right now.
And I remember, and I think because they used to. I don't know if they still have it or not, but I remember they used to have a Reebok outlet. I think they might still have it.
Yeah.
But they used to have it, and I was like, at that time I won't feel them, but now, like as an adult, I'm like, man, he's kind of fire, like, and they have them in different types of colors now. So that's the thing about it, where it's just like,
yeah, they're a great shoe. I remember, so my son told the story. So my nephew had the answers, and my son was too small to get the answers, but he wanted to be Allen Iverson, so he would put on his shoes, and then when he put on his shoes, he could fit into my nephew's shoes and wear them around. That's how much he wanted to be Allen Iverson, how much he wanted the answers and the shoes and all that. Like they're super important. This cultural stuff, it doesn't age well because you can't remember it. And if you're too young, it's nothing negative about it, but it's hard to describe the impact that he had on culture of sports. It was just, like I say, the closest thing is like when hip hop, blew up in the late 80s or mid 80s, whenever, that's the closest thing I describe it to, is like, half the people were like, I don't get it, this won't work. And the other half are like, I've been waiting for this. I didn't know we were waiting for Allen Iverson, but now we know that that's who we've been waiting for. And they, to give him a chance at the number one pick is unheard of. For that size and everything and the skill set. But it worked, man. It worked. He's truly an icon. So I gotta pin you down. Where do you don't have to give me an exact number. Where do you rank Iverson all time, NBA all time players? And you can factor in everything. You don't have to just go by the court. You can factor in everything.
And it's funny because it's funny, like, because we in the group chat we were kind of talking about, like, as far as the MJ LeBron comparison, and then then it's funny, and it kind of ties down to what we talk about now as far as the impacts, because today we really talked about a lot of stuff that I think a lot of people will forget, because especially now, and I'm glad you pointed out the Curry thing, because you know how now people are saying like he's one of the most influential athletes in the last 30 years, and I'm like, no, like I get it if you're like, maybe, 20 or so. Yeah, I get that. But as as us respectively in late 30s, early in mid 40s, we know Allen Iverson set that bar. He was, so we look at how now the modern athlete is. It's almost like when and it's funny when you talk about how LeBron and all those guys are kind of like vocal in a sense and kind of don't have that I don't care kind of attitude. It's almost like the next level of what Allen Iverson was at the beginning, because that's how Allen Iverson really was. And we talked about it earlier, as far as we talked about the dress code, and we just talked about how all the perceptions at that time of how he was. I think if you look at from the whole totality, as far as, and what's so sad about it all is you want to put him in the top 10 because you look at the fact that if I had to put potential as a layer, he would be in that. And then also the impact, coupled with the impact, because I think more so of the game, because like you said, we're going to forget about the stats per se in the next 15, 20 years. Yeah. And
they'll be crushed by then. Yeah,
he'd be crushed. And a new generation will form, and then Allen Iverson will be almost like in a history book that's unread.
Yeah.
But the impact of what he is, and it's even stuff that's going on to this present day is unmatched. I mean, obviously Jordan is the bar, but Allen Iverson is right there as well, and along with like LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, those influential, iconic, no pun intended, from players.
More to come.
But he does belong in there, and especially for the hype. And that's the thing is too, where a lot of people and it's that just me saying it, but his peers, if he was Jordan size, he would probably want to be one of the greatest players of all time.
Oh, it would
no question. And you
athletic
think
ability off the charts.
We're talking about a guy who is I don't even think he's 6 feet.
Most people that have met him say that he's lucky to be 5'11". That's most people that have met him.
Yeah, and you look at that, and then with him being 165 pounds, and you got to think yourself, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever, especially in at that time where the league was so physical, and for him to kind of break through that and
over 900 games, right. 900 games,
and yeah, to me, I look at it, I'll probably put him in at least like probably top 25.
I think around.
I put him in the 20 in that area.
Because I'm with you, man. I think that people don't realize that players off the court, the playing styles, like, we talk, we'll touch on that just in a second, but we talk about Kirby. As far as off the court, players act more like Iverson now than they do Jordan. Because Jordan, we know how buttoned up Jordan was. We know how he did it, and it worked. He made his $1 billion. He owns a team now. Jordan did what he knew he needed to do to get to where he's at now, and I don't no problems with it whatsoever. Could he have spoke up on stuff, and had a huge influence? Of course, but once again, it's not his job. He did it on the court, but he also the long game, and that's why I always defend Jordan when everybody talks about, we talked about this when we did the podcast about The Last Dance last year. Jordan takes so much heat because he wasn't Iverson. He didn't speak up. He didn't call people out. Well, here's what I know. Jordan also got himself in a position to where he's a minority owner of an NBA basketball team. So sometimes you got to look at the long picture and what these – now, if Jordan would have never done anything and disappeared, I would have probably called that a failure. But now look at the influence he has. I mean, he started a NASCAR team for Bubba Wallace. So just to compare, like, everybody's automatic like, Iverson did it better. No, he just did it different. Yep. No, he just did it different, So yeah, I've got him around 20 because of influence and all that. And like I said, I already touched on it, but like players that kind of remind me of him now, like John Morant's got a little Iverson in him as far as the explosion. Curry, I think, is the closest one. I know that to watch the highlights, they don't look the same, but we've already talked about the open floor and allowed to do what you can do at a slightly smaller size than everybody else and all that. So those are guys that kind of remind me, but everybody wants to be AI, man.
Yeah, and that's Steven's point too, where and it kind of ties in what we were saying in the beginning of if he would have went to Toronto and how that Isaiah Thomas, Allen Iverson dynamic would have worked.
Yeah,
and that's like the ultimate what if.
The only thing I wonder about that is because Isaiah Thomas has proven to be a bit of a gatekeeper over the years. So to this, like, I don't know, like, is that the guy that would have made Isaiah like, okay, I need to take this young man and help him out and make him the guy that I was? Or do they just clash and does Isaiah trade him the next year? It's complete what ifs. I don't know. I know both their careers are different. If that happens, I can tell you that. Is Toronto more accepting of AI? Do Americans like AI as much if he's wearing a Raptors jersey instead of the Sixers uniforms back then were pretty tight. I like that black and red. You could sell that. I just don't know.
And that's another thing where he could have became an international superstar. Well, as far as right, like, and when we think about we think about Vince Carter as far as his, as far as how he is in Toronto folklore.
Yeah.
Just and then I love the Sixers uniform back then. Those were good. Then then the Raptor with the actual dinosaur on it. That was dope. AI in purple. But yeah, I mean and that's another thing too, where that would have probably took a life of his own as well. Like it's how Canadians would have essentially acquiesced to Allen Iverson. Like if it would the perception would have been a little bit different than what it was in the United States. And definitely at that time on a team on a rise, well, not on a rise, but an expansion team at that, which that would have, that could have
been his team. He would have that would be his team.
His team.
That would have been his team to this
Right.
day. The Sixers had Dr. J, Moses Malone, championships.
Yep.
It's a yeah, you're right. That would have been his team. That would have been wild, man. That would have been wild. And how does Toronto not get Nash in that draft? I know that nobody would have drafted Nash second, but if Toronto winds up with Nash is the biggest Canadian star in history. Like he might pass Shania Twain.
right. He's next level. He would be a hybrid of a Celine Dion as well. As far as the folklore, right? As far as the folklore and
it would be Steve Nash and maple syrup. That would be the two things. Like that would be it. That'd be the list. No offense, man, I love y'all.
Yeah.
All right, man. We scratched. I think we scratched the surface. I hope we got people thinking more about AI. I hope younger people go back and watch press conferences, watch interviews. He's one of the more honest, open athletes that you'll ever see. He's a true legend of the game. I just recommend do your research. Go back and just watch highlights. Just watch highlights all day long of Iverson. It's fascinating. I had one queued up here. We didn't quite get to it, but I mean, everybody's got YouTube. Everybody's got something in their, some sort of screen in their hand. They can go check out AI. He's one of those guys that we're lucky enough that we have enough footage of him that you can do your own research. If an old head like me is telling you, how great Iverson is, and you think I'm crazy and that he couldn't play in today's game, I would say go watch the AI mixtape. It'll be a fun, some of the funnest 5 or 10 minutes of your life until you go down that rabbit hole. So that's it, man. AI, man, absolute icon. And I'm glad that he was my first episode, and I'm glad that the Couch Coach Live was my first guest. This has been a blast, man.
Yeah.
So everybody go to offtheballnetwork.com, check out everything we're doing. Go listen to Couch Coach Live, watch his shows. You see it right there at Couch Coach Live. Find him on Twitter, find him on Facebook. Find us everywhere. Really a lot of great content on a weekly basis coming out from the whole crew at Off the Ball Network right now. And support for Jeff Needs Sports was brought to you by Manscaped, who's the best in men's below the waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision engineered tools for your family jewels. They obsess over their technology developments to provide you the best tools for your grooming experience. Manscaped is trusted by over 2 million men worldwide. We have an exclusive offer for our listeners today, 20% off plus free shipping with the code JHUNT. That's capital JHUNT or capital OTBN. Either one of those will get you 20% off at manscaped.com right now. And we want to thank them for their support. I truly don't endorse anything I don't believe in, and I believe in this product more than it might be saving lives. Manscaped might be saving lives, Coach.
Oh yeah.
I
am a witness.
So once again, thanks for everybody. Check out Jeff Needs Sports. Check out Couch Coach Live. Check out Off the Ball Network. You're all the greatest. Be kind, and we'll see you next time on another episode of Icons.